Hey, my name's Patrick, and today we're going to talk about this Honeywell Pressuretrol. This is 404 something something, some bunch of letters Pressuretrol. I call it the gray box for obvious reasons. It's one of the two Pressuretrols that Honeywell makes. The other one is being this see-through box. This one tends to be slightly more precise. Precise is a matter of verbiage because none of those Pressuretrols are really precise. They are not precise device whatsoever, despite what they look like. But anyway, today we're going to talk about this guy. So what is the function of a Pressuretrol? Pressuretrol's function is to shut down the boiler when the pressure within the boiler reaches certain level, and then when the pressure starts falling down, to cut in, or rather turn on the boiler on again when the pressure falls below a certain level. And that's really basic function of it. Why do we need Pressuretrol? Pressuretrols because we don't want any pressure within the boiler, your steam boiler. In other words, the boiler builds up pressure, or rather it builds up steam. The water inside the boiler heats up. The steam travels to all sorts of different places, namely your radiators, and then at some point the radiators get filled up with pressure, or your pressure with steam, or your pipes get filled up with steam as well. The radiators, air valves, those little devices on the sides of the radiator, they close as they're supposed to, trapping all the steam inside, and then somehow the thermostat is still not satisfied, so the steam boiler keeps on still producing steam, but that steam has nowhere else to go. And thus the pressure inside the steam boiler builds up. We don't want that pressure to be too high for all sorts of reasons. So then that's where the Pressuretrol comes into play, and then shuts down the boiler at certain predetermined pressure level. That is the theory. As always, the practice is a bit different, and partially because those Pressuretrols are notoriously not precise. So in other words, you set some kind of settings, and we're going to talk about in a moment what those settings really mean, and then kind of whether the Pressuretrol works or not. You know, it's relative. Those gray boxes tend to be slightly more quotation mark precise, because they actually do work, generally speaking, unlike those guys that are often straight out of the box, brand new. They are not correctly set straight from the factory. So often you would get those Pressuretrols straight out of the box, and that would never shut down the pressure because it's not properly calibrated. Those guys, because in many ways they are simpler devices, they tend to work a bit better, let's call it. That said, though, if I had to pick between this guy and this guy, I would pick this guy. Partially because the calibration to recalibrate this guy is relatively easy, and I have another video about it. It's via this hole right here. And meanwhile, calibration with this gray box is a bit more complicated because it involves a metal tab that needs to be moved, or rather kind of adjusted with the screwdriver. So anyway, first thing first, let's see whether this is some random gray box Pressuretrol I got straight from the internet to kind of show you its workings. I already kind of connected it to our little test devices, which is as basic as a low pressure gauge going from 0 to 5 psi. You must have a gauge like this attached to your Pressuretrol. Otherwise, you really have no clue what's going on inside your boiler. Anyway, so it's I connected it. I have it set to as a little as possible. Actually, before we kind of start testing it, let's just talk about really quickly what it does. All right, so we have a cadence. This is this cadence scale, which means it says start the boiler when the pressure buildup drops below certain level. So here we have so cadence at half a psi. So that means, you know, in theory is that when the pressure drops to half a psi, start the boiler again. Let's just open this guy again inside, so we can see what's inside this guy. So this is the inside of the Pressuretrol. It's a very basic switch. Then you have and then you have the dial, and then the idea is that as the pressure raises up, it cuts down the electricity. Just really quickly show you how this works. So here we have our this is a little light bulb, so that's our boiler. Let's just attach those little guys right here. Okay. Haphazardly, but it should do it. And they have another guy going in to this place right here. And as you can see, the light bulb is on. So that means right now there's electricity flowing through the switch to the boiler. So the boiler is working. And then when it keeps on producing steam, the steam goes to all the radiators. The radiators fill up with steam, and the thermostat keeps on calling for heat. So the pressure, boiler keeps on working. And the idea is that at some point when this pressure starts building up, the switch inside here is going to interrupt the flow of electricity to our light bulb. So if you pay attention, you just see what happens when I start introducing the steam, the pressure. Okay, so around 3 psi, the boiler shuts off, which is, by the way, a lot. That's a lot of pressure inside your boiler. And then let's release the pressure slightly and see at which point the boiler is going to start working again. Okay, so it goes from more or less 3 psi to, let's say, 1.5 psi. Let's do it one more time. So in other words, now the boiler started working again. Okay, and now it stops working again. And then let's release again. So it's around a 1.5 psi drop that the system allows for. Again, notice it's totally different than what it's set to. So you have the cut-in and you have differential. This dial right here is a differential. Right now it's set to 1. So the idea is that you take this number, ½ pound, and this number, which is 1 pound, and should tell you at which point this is the maximum pressure, at which point this switch should turn off the boiler. As you notice, we have to go all the way to 3 psi for the boiler to shut, our light bulb to shut down. One more time. Okay, so we have to 3 psi, which means this Pressuretrol is not properly calibrated. To calibrate this Pressuretrol, we would have to work with there's a what's called metal tang right here that we would have to adjust it, and we're gonna just do it in a moment. Just release all the pressure. Okay, so that means okay. Alright, so our pressure is, our boiler is working because we had 0 psi. So now let's just adjust this pressure control so it's working a bit different, a bit better. Let me see, maybe this screwdriver might be better for this. Okay, so let's see. We adjusted too much. So pretty. Let's see. Yeah. So let's see how much cutoff we have. Okay, that's actually not bad. So let's see what happened. By simply moving this tank up and down, we made enough of an adjustment so that right now our Pressuretrol shuts down the boiler at around 1.5 psi, less than 1.5. So you can hear the click even though the light bulb goes off slightly earlier. So 1.25, and then cuts in. Let's see when it cuts in. So we drop on the pressure right now. Okay, so almost at 0 psi. So that's not bad. So as you can see, we went from a Pressuretrol that goes all the way to 3 psi before it shuts down to something that's actually quite decent, 1 point something. That's actually a great working Pressuretrol now. In other words, confidently we can put it on your boiler, and you're gonna have a nice working range. In other words, ideally the pressure you don't want to build up more than 1.5, and then you kind of drop it off by 1. So this is exactly what it's doing. So in other words, the differential here is doing quite a good job. So in other words, whatever the top pressure is, which is the top this plus this, 1.5 plus 1 equals 1.5, and then drops off to where the difference between the top and then and the bottom is 1 psi. Just a little side note, here we're working on a bench, which means the temperature in this space, first of all, I'm laying down rather than the Pressuretrol normally is standing upright. Second of all, the temperature inside this room is around 70 degrees. The Pressuretrol will be attached to your boiler. The temperatures might be like 80, 90 degrees, and maybe even more surrounding this Pressuretrol. As you know, metal expands when it gets heated, so that means you might notice say the different settings. In other words, the final test of your Pressuretrol is always on when you connect it to your boiler, not on the bench. So this is basically preset, and then you bring it back, and that's why it's so important to have a low pressure gauge attached to your boiler, so that you can actually see what's happening, what's going on inside your boiler. Just wondering if we can make this just slightly even better working, so we hit exactly. Again, the scales are so not precise, so maybe it's good enough. Let's see, maybe it's good enough for what it is. That's kind of feel more confident, because what happens, I want to cut the pressure to cut in, the pressure that the electricity to cut in before it reaches complete zero, and that makes me more comfortable. One more time, let's see. So I go to 1.5 and then cut off. Okay, great. All right, so now with just tiny little adjustment, we made this Pressuretrol to work properly from something out of ordinary. Again, the movement of those, the little manipulation I did of this little metal tab was tiny, just tiny, and yet that was just enough to turn it kind of mediocre working Pressuretrol into a very good working Pressuretrol. And what will be a good pressure for your pressure inside your boiler to cut out? That's a conversation for yet another video. But right now we have a nice working gray box Pressuretrol. That's that. Hopefully that was helpful for somebody.